Let's call our work session to order. Do we have Kathleen on the phone?
Not yet.
Okay. So, Kathleen is out today, sick. She may be joining us virtually. She was taking care of Mike and, the gift
Not
was,
what he had.
the gift was given. Yeah. And she's got it now. So, appreciate her staying away and everyone else when you're not feeling good. So thanks. We'll go over the agenda real quick for tonight. We've got the work session for the Mass Timber Code update. Then when we start a regular session, I don't see anybody in here, so I'll avoid the send your comments in. But if you're online and listening, make sure you've filled out the appropriate forms for giving comments. We'll do the consent agenda, which includes the city council goal setting minutes and the minutes from our last formal meeting, regular meeting. We'll have a presentation from Mount Hood Community College and then our old business for the second readings for the two ordinances that we talked about. Oh, she is here. And I'm leaving and I'm getting a mask.
I'm just gonna stay for the work session.
Do you want to
just log in?
Do you want to preside? Do you want to
No,
preside or
no.
you want to defer presiding?
No, my voice is.
Okay, so with that, the mayor's here, but I will continue to preside under her direction.
You like?
Is there a question? Okay. As far as the new business, then we'll be looking at two task orders for Sandy's wastewater and the engineering department, and then the IGA approval for the community services officer, and then we'll wrap it up with the city manager report and staff and the council reports. So let's do roll call, I guess, Jeff.
Sure, happy to.
All
Yeah.
right.
Would you like me to take roll of the commission as well?
Yeah,
We've done that. We've done it either way over the years. So,
I defer to you and the mayor.
okay. So starting with the planning commission, we'll start with Chair Wagner. Here. Commissioner Crosby. Here. Commissioner Poulin
She's sick as well.
is six. Okay. Commissioner O'Leary. I believe I see him online.
Yeah.
He's there. He is. Commissioner Zawoski. Here. Commissioner Malone.
Here.
And Commissioner Lee. I don't.
She had another meeting.
Okay. And, okay, and to the council, Councilor Mayton. I don't currently see. Councilor Smallwood.
Here.
Councilor Sheldon. I believe is not here.
He was
Okay,
excused. He's, yeah. he's absent.
excellent. Okay, Commissioner Ramsayer,
Here.
Commissioner Hanley,
Here.
Council President Hokinson,
Here.
and Mayor Walker.
Here, and I think Rich might be coming in, at around 7 or so on Zoom.
Excellent.
Cool. So with that, let's kick it off. Mass timber update. Take it away.
I'll give a brief intro and then I'll kick it over to Kelly. Thank you, Council President.
If anybody would like a mask, we do have
We
masks.
do have some.
So just a quick sort of introduction to this topic this evening. Part of the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan included grant funding for communities to identify ways to benefit from certain components of their local economy, in our case, mass timber or the timber industry. In 2023, the city submitted a grant application to the Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD, as you most often hear us refer to it, to provide us some technical assistance in looking at our code and determining if there was areas to incorporate some mass timber updates and modifications. We were subsequently awarded that grant funding, I think in September or October of 2023. That sounds right. And MIG has been working on reviewing our current code and looking at ways to incorporate some mass timber modifications since that time. So, we're here before you this evening because part of our grant agreement with DLCD was to have a work session with the governing body before March of 2025. And so here we are coming up in March. And so I wanted to get these findings from MIG before you for conversation. I think it's important to note that we're not, seeking to adopt these
Now connected to laptop F4 Dub 1P.
forward to have a conversation with you about. share with you the findings that were part of MIG's work. As Kelly mentions in his staff report, we can incorporate all of this, none of this, some of this, whatever feels right. It also bleeds into the housing production strategy work that we'll be doing later this year, as potential code modifications that we could include as part of the HPS. And so all that to say, the intent this evening is certainly more informative, get feedback, have a conversation, provide direction if you like what you hear, if you don't like what you hear, if you want to see us move forward with some of this, if you don't want to see us move forward, that's all up for grabs this evening. But we wanted to take advantage. Sorry, I thought you were trying to say something. My apologies. But certainly we wanted to take advantage of the grant funding that was being provided through the state, as one of, gosh, I think just 10 cities in Oregon that received some funding for work like this. And so that's how we kind of got here this evening. Kelly, I hope I didn't steal any of your thunder, but I'll turn it over to you for some more background and setting the stage.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Yeah, so it was an opportunity to apply for a grant. All of the work that MIG performed was paid for by the state of Oregon. The city didn't have a local match whatsoever. As Tyler said, it was awarded to 10 jurisdictions. We are one of those 10 jurisdictions. The only money or time we've spent on this project is time that I've spent on looking at the code edits and giving some remarks to the consulting group. And as Tyler said, it's really more for your knowledge on what could be changed in the code to encourage more prefabricated mass timber housing. There's nothing tied to the grant where you have to adopt anything that's being proposed to you tonight. And another thing that you can consider is delaying some or all of the potential code amendments or anything you're interested in with the code amendments with the HPS, as Tyler mentioned. The good thing about delaying the majority of these code amendments for consideration would be that we could then get credit if we decided to move forward with some of them with our HPS. So even if the Council and Planning Commission were really enthused with the code edits before you tonight, my recommendation would still be not to adopt the majority of them because I'd rather get those for housing credits with the production study. So with that, the only other thing I'll say before I turn it over to Brandon with MIG is that for those of you that will remember, MIG is the firm that we selected through a competitive process to do our clear and objective code audit. So, and Brandon actually did work on that code audit as well, early on in the process. And then later in the process, you'll remember that Kathy Corliss and Kate Rogers worked on it and presented to the City Council and Commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brandon.
Cool. Thanks, Kelly and Jeff. Appreciate the intro, and apologies in advance if I repeat some of your kind of background on the project, but thanks for having me. I'm Brandon Crawford. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm a consultant with MIG. So we're the team that led the Mass Timber Code Update project for the 10 jurisdictions that were selected for the grant funding. So I'll just share a presentation to go over the code update recommendations kind of at a high level and a little bit of the background, and we can kind of just breeze through the parts that Kelly and Jeff already talked about. So, all right. Are you all able to see my screen all right? Is it sharing?
We're not seeing it right now, Brandon.
Oh, okay. Try that again. Okay, how about now?
Looks like it's coming. There we go. Yep.
Okay, I'll put it in presentation mode. So
I'll
you'll see it
bring it up here too, folks.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
Put you on wheels next time.
Yeah.
Spin around easier.
All right, so just a quick agenda for what will be included in this presentation. Just the requested action from City Council, which will just be kind of reiterate what Jeff and Kelly discussed. A little bit more context on project background, and then we'll jump into the recommended code updates, and then we'll talk about next steps and get feedback from y'all. So the two asks for you all tonight is just to review and provide input on the regulatory text amendments. In other words, the text amendments that are more focused around consistency with state statute, and those really revolve around manufactured homes and prefabricated dwellings. And then also just to provide some input on some of the recommendations and concepts around cottage clusters and ADUs, particularly as it pertains to how it can be incorporated into the housing production strategy. So don't want to repeat too much of what Kelly and Jeff mentioned, but for a little bit more context, the department, the U.S. Economic Development Agency, EDA, provided a little over $41 million in grant money to the state to explore various aspects of kind of promoting mass timber as an economic development strategy. And a piece of that grant funding was awarded to or given to DLCD specifically for this code update project, as well as a more kind of community engagement focused project with the same 10 jurisdictions. A different consulting firm led that work, and that community engagement was more focused around just general education and informing residents in the community about mass timber and just getting general community input on it. So a little background on mass timber and modular housing generally. Mass timber is really just a form of prefabricated construction. So you probably noticed in the code update recommendations in the memo, we mainly refer to mass timber through terms of prefabricated and modular housing, because those are kind of umbrella terms that kind of include mass timber. So to define prefabricated, it includes a couple things here. So one, it being a building that's just manufactured off-site in a closed construction facility, and it is then either assembled wholly or partially on site. So fairly simple definition of a couple graphics and images here that kind of illustrate what that looks like. Currently, the city's definition is modular housing, but that's basically synonymous with prefabricated housing. And I think it's important to note that modular and prefabricated housing in the city would still have to meet all the state's building code requirements. So some of the objectives of the project overall. First step was to create a prefabricated modular housing model code, which we kind of used as the basis for auditing the city's current zoning code and providing recommendations. And then we provided the direct technical assistance to each of the 10 jurisdictions, as Kelly mentioned, shown here on this map of Oregon are the 10 jurisdictions we've worked with, and Sandy is the final one we were working with. So we've already gone through this process with every other jurisdiction shown here on the map. And then support with the general communications and adoption process, which is kind of what we're doing here. So now to get into the specific code update recommendations. Just a general overview.
Got a question from Mayor Walker.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
You know, we really, I was fairly confused about the use of the word mass timber, which in my understanding is kind of just doing those large multi-story apartments. With the big blue lamps and all that versus this kind of prefab panel that is, you know, more appropriate for your clusters and things like that. So are you saying that you could do clusters with mass timber, the big, huge tall things, or is that kind of a, you know, I guess if you're calling it all mass timber, it's different things, you know? So we're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mass timber is just the construction material, so it can be constructed or used for a single family home or multifamily apartment complex or cottage cluster. It's just the building material. And it has been used for single family homes, cottage clusters. But yeah, you're right. It also is commonly used for larger multifamily apartment complexes. That's what you see a lot of or a lot more of in Portland, but in smaller communities such as the Sandy or more rural areas, it's probably more feasible for smaller forms of housing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Is there a mass timber housing other than for one-off custom built homes? Are you aware of a commercial development done with mass timber that wasn't multi-unit?
I am not off the top of my head. The only thing that comes to mind that isn't is non-residential that it was mass timber construction is the renovated airport terminal in Portland.
Yeah, different scale.
If you're looking for a residential.
Yeah, there's,
So the reason I'm asking is there've been several startups in the Portland, in the Northwest area to do this, but most of them have gone under financially because it doesn't pencil out. So it's just the point that the mayor and I talked about earlier, just concerns about labeling this mass timber when it's really probably not about mass timber. It's probably about these other prefab or modular, not mass timber. So just, I think that's important because we have in our economic strategy and we've talked about the need to promote mass timber. This probably isn't doing that.
Thanks for that clarification. Kelly, I see your hand is raised. If you wanted to weigh in.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, I mean
Sorry,
Kelly
this
Reed,
is
sorry.
Kelly. If
Kelly.
you don't mind, I can maybe speak to that question a little bit.
Kelly Reed's with the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
She's our DLCD representative.
okay,
Go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
I confused
So,
them.
Yeah, Kelly, go please. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, Kelly Reed, I'm your regional representative from DLCD. I did not really work directly on this project. Our economic development specialist, Lee McElvain, is out today. And she's more educated on this than I am, but I'm looking at DLCD's webpage on Mass Timber and going to the Mass Timber Coalition link, which talks about Terminal 2 in Portland, where they're building a facility that's going to be supplying mass timber panels for modular homes. And so I don't think it's there yet. This is an emerging industry. And so this part of that, part of the grant funding that we're using for this project that we got from the Economic Development Administration at the federal level, a much larger sum of funding from that grant is going towards this research and development of the industry and towards funding some of the construction of this facility. So I think that you're totally right in that there aren't a lot of examples of modular housing using mass timber or even smaller scale housing using mass timber yet. I think that, there's hope, there's hope and there's a lot of effort behind making that happen for various reasons of why mass timber is a good product that has advantages, I
You don't have to
guess.
On
For
mass timber.
sorry, I didn't hear.
You don't have to sell some mass timber. We're fairly aware of its
Sure.
value, especially to our region here in the Northwest and even out in our area with some of the entities that have located here. So we're excited about that.
Sure, great.
So,
Yeah,
we-
just
Comfortable putting a mass timber label on something that's not mass timber oriented.
understood. Yeah, and whoever made the point that there's not a whole lot out there right now, that is, a whole lot of examples of mass timber products that aren't in like multifamily or commercial buildings. I think that's correct, as of now.
Yeah.
So thanks.
And Council President, we do have Commissioner O'Leary's hand up online as well.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Commissioner, go for it.
Yeah, real quick, as a point of clarification, I think there's a new library being built either in East Portland or
Gresham.
Gresham. That's mass timber. It's a pretty cool looking building.
Oh, no, very, very cool. But when we're talking about small houses.
Right, but somebody asked before if there was something other than apartment buildings being built. I was just letting everybody know there's one there. I want some clarification of what exactly we're talking about here. I understand the mass timber aspect, but when I see things that we're looking at upgrading the code, and I see things like ADUs and cottage style living, would that, as it gets upgraded, would that include other ways of prefabbing like stick-built panels or SYP panels, or is it strictly mass timber?
So can I recommend, in the interest of time, let's hold that thought and let's get through the presentation. And if you
Cool.
let's get through the presentation quickly so that we can have discussion.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, yeah, thanks. Those are good questions, and next few slides might answer some of those questions. So yeah, to continue on here, as I mentioned, code update recommendations kind of fall into two buckets. One being just alignment with state statute around prefabricated and manufactured dwellings. And the reason we included that in the kind of scope of this project is because, again, mass timber is really just one form of prefabricated construction and development. So it made sense to just go ahead and do a code audit and code update recommendations for all forms of prefabricated dwelling. So by doing so, you're kind of checking the box for removing barriers and improving opportunities for mass timber specifically as well. So outside of that bucket of state statute consistency for prefab, there's the other category, which is more towards just recommended opportunities. So this is where the city could go above and beyond a little bit, beyond what's required by the state. So that's kind of where we get into the recommendations for cottage clusters and ADUs. So I'll get a little bit more into the specifics. Next few slides. So a little bit more background on the state statute consistency piece. So it's House Bill 4064 and this ORS cited here. That legislation was passed a few years ago, and basically it requires all cities throughout the state to allow prefabricated homes or manufactured homes on any lot that allows single unit or single family dwellings, and basically needs to treat them the same in terms of how design and development standards apply, with a few exceptions. So can't apply any restrictive design standards that don't already apply to single family dwellings. And then another piece was cities need to allow prefab dwellings inside manufactured dwelling parks as well. So for the most part, we looked at the city's code, and the city complies with HB 4064, and most of the updates were made to the code as part of the Clear and Objective project that Kelly mentioned kind of at the top of this meeting. So for the most part, cities in compliance. We just made a few minor amendments to just kind of clarify things and improve consistency with state statute. So a few of those minor changes included updating the definition for manufactured homes, just so it's more in line with the state's current definition.
Ask a question of clarification, please. So,
Sure.
the state defined it to include residential trailers, which were constructed before 1962, mobile homes that were constructed before 1976, and then manufactured homes that were obviously after that. So are you saying that we're including all those old, moldy, fallen apart, 60-plus-year-old trailers as good to go on our single-family lot
No, no. Oh, the city only needs to allow manufactured homes on single family lots. And so manufactured homes are the ones that are built after 1976. So that's the more modern, up-to-date version. The city doesn't need to allow residential trailers or mobile homes. The city does still need to at least allow those types in manufactured dwelling parks, but not on lots that allow single family homes. Does that
Alright.
answer your question?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, Another change we made was just tweaked the definition for single family home to just also include manufactured homes. So only manufactured homes, so not residential trailers or mobile homes. So manufactured homes are basically kind of considered synonymous with single family homes. So that way, any development or design standard that's applying to single family homes in the code will inherently also apply to manufactured homes. So that's just kind of an easy way to ensure that the city complies across the code. Um, and then for design review, I think we just made a minor change here to clarify that dwellings, just any type of dwelling within a manufactured dwelling park, is subject to this design review standard here that's cited here. And the reason we changed it to dwellings rather than all those other types specified that are crossed out here is to include prefabricated dwellings. So that was another state requirement, is prefab also needs to be allowed in manufactured dwelling parks. So that's really kind of sums up that first category of regulatory state statute consistency changes, and now moving on to the kind of opportunity changes, those that will likely kick over to the HPS. So mainly around ADUs
Brandon, I
and
have a
cottage clusters. Oh,
back to the
question?
manufactured homes. Isn't it likely that, our existing code requires, Kelly, it's, so many elements of, rock or shake, whatever, different elements.
Right.
And isn't it likely that these manufactured homes would have, would need additional trim or whatever, maybe a porch or something like that in order to, because I know we have to allow it, but we also are allowed to require all the same standards as a regular stick-built home. So are all our elements and sandy style and all that applicable to the manufactured homes?
They are applicable to manufactured homes on individual lots of record, but not applicable to manufactured homes or prefab homes in an existing manufactured home park.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at halfway through our hour, so if we can go quickly through these other slides,
Sure.
that would be great.
So quickly on ADUs, we recommended just providing a little bit more flexibility in terms of the square footage. So either increasing max square footage to 800, 900 square feet, or a percentage of the primary dwellings overall size, whichever is less. So that gives a property owner a little bit more flexibility. Reducing the setbacks, which would kind of enable better opportunities for a property owner to kind of convert an existing structure to an ADU, such as like a detached garage or something like that. And then also exempting ADUs from public facility improvements, which is currently already an exemption for single family homes and duplexes. So just applying that exemption to ADUs as well. Cottage clusters, so just kind of overview on what cottage clusters are. Some of the key traits. The definition is 4 detached units on a minimum 4 detached units per acre, that is. with a maximum of 900 square foot footprint or an average of 1,400 square feet per unit among all the units. We recommend a max height of 25 feet. Some key features include a common courtyard that's shared between all the units. And we also recommend just applying most of the same single family development and lot dimension standards, such as lot size, width, setbacks, all the same ones that apply to single family, just apply those to cottage clusters as well. So a few things to consider. Cottage clusters have potential for providing opportunities for manufactured and prefabricated housing, including mass timber, as we discussed earlier. And as we mentioned earlier, this is not a state requirement. So there's plenty of flexibility with how the city can implement cottage clusters. That being said, we did start with the state's model code and state statute requirements that apply to large cities, just kind of as a starting point. But Sandy has plenty of flexibility for how you can implement and design those standards, since those requirements don't apply to Sandy. So we also reviewed the city's comprehensive plan just to ensure that our recommendations were consistent with the city's comp plan policies and that there wouldn't necessarily have to be any policy updates. So didn't see anything that necessarily conflicted with the comp plan, and didn't recommend any updated comp plan policies. There are a few comprehensive plan policies we did highlight here, though, that kind of support the broad objective of this project. So one being housing policy 2, which is to encourage the private sector to provide housing. Housing policy 3, which is to just encourage an innovation in housing production. And then housing policy 5, which is to provide information on current programs, techniques, etc. So all 3 of these policies kind of hit the mark in terms of what this project is trying to achieve. So again, recommendation, we would recommend adopting the amendments that are in alignment or in that first category of state statute consistency. Again, cities mostly compliant with those requirements around prefab and manufactured homes. So it's just a few minor updates. And then the other recommendation would be to just continue to consider cottage clusters and ADUs through the housing production strategy process. So this is kind of getting a head start on that. So our next steps will be to revise the recommended amendments and provide a final draft and get those ready for adoption if the city chooses to adopt any of the amendments. So I'll leave it there and we can open it up to questions.
Anything else, Kelly, for our discussion?
Hi.
I recommend we take this in 2 parts. And the first part I hope is the easy part, which is the first part of that discussion was the alignment with House Bill 4064, basically the cleanup to make us more clear with things we don't really have a lot of choice about. Any discussion or questions or concerns with that section of the recommendations? That would be slides 29, 30, starting at 30, 31.
You're looking at the code, 4064.
I was looking at the slides, but it would be
Yeah.
the code associated with those slides.
Which we're required to do by law, so.
That's essentially,
Yeah.
it's seemed to me like it's just clear.
I
agree.
So pretty unanimous on that?
Mhm.
Okay. Then the next part gets more fun. Access ADUs and cottage clusters. And I think Commissioner O'Leary, you had some concerns with some things about that. And I mean, I know pretty much probably everybody else does too. So who would like to go first?
Say go back to art.
Hmm?
So go back to.
Commissioner O'Leary,
Yeah.
if you want to get your point out there now?
Yeah, my only question was, we talk about mass timber, and I know that's the purpose of this meeting, but when the codes get upgraded, is it focused towards mass timber, or is that just something that's allowed along with other types of construction, including prefab, which there's already, companies out there stick building panels and shipping them to sites. You don't see as much SYP anymore, those SIP panels, or I think it's CIP, but I'm a little confused on the mass timber focus, and I know there's a big push for it, and I'm not against it. I just am hoping that we're headed towards whatever we do includes allowing other types of professional construction.
You want to take that, Kelly, or do you want to opine on that?
I'll let MIG or the state of Oregon or Kelly Reed take that.
Sure. This is more kind of, I guess you could say it's branded as more so as mass timber, but the substance of the code updates function are just improving opportunities for prefabricated generally. So that would also include some of the other building practices and materials that you mentioned there. So it is more broad than just mass timber. Does that answer your question?
And that's
Generally good enough.
that's the way I heard it too, Commissioner, is that this has the word mass timber on it, but it's really about these other things that we're talking about in terms of small modular construction. And if mass timber pencils out someday, then perhaps it'll be a big player there, but.
Yeah, and the reason it's kind of branded as mass timber, that's the term we're using for the project generally, is because that was what the grant money was for. That was the whole kind of purpose, was all things mass timber. But development codes, zoning codes don't typically regulate building materials as much. It's more focused on land use. So we're focused on land use and developments types that are more compatible with mass timber. So that includes off-site construction, prefab, etc.
Let's move on to ADUs, because as a council, we've talked about ADU size before. We used to have it smaller, if I remember. I don't remember, 600, was that right? And then we bumped it up to 800 or somewhere.
720.
720.
600 to 720.
And now there's a proposal to go up to as high as 900. How do we feel about this? Council and Commission.
I'm really not in favor of that, just because, these ADUs are becoming basically second homes on the lot. Your footprint is 900 square feet. That's almost,
900 square
Single-family
feet is a
homes,
big
1,800.
part of a 14 or 1,300 square foot
Yeah.
single residence
But
house
didn't-
today.
Didn't it also say 900 square feet or 75% of the existing dwelling? So it
Or-
wouldn't be 900 square feet. If the house was the
Whichever,
primary house was 1,200, it's not gonna.
then it would be 75 to 85% would be our
Right.
threshold.
It could be
Right.
900.
But it could be still pretty
My
big.
concern is that, I don't know if these consultants know that we're in a moratorium. And we have no ability to develop any more housing. And I just feel like we need to be able to postpone implementing some of this stuff until we have more certainty on our moratorium.
Well, I think this is a pretty quick, kind of a yay or nay, or not a vote, but are we in favor of increasing it from where we are now? And just to give staff direction as to where we might be.
I am, because again, like Linda's point, right, it's a percentage of what that size is. And you're really talking about, at the end of the day, let's say somebody had the capacity to do 900 square feet. We're talking 75 to 100 more square feet, which doesn't get you a whole lot. Especially for somebody who may not have someplace to live. That's the whole point of these ADUs.
Mhm.
And the state is also mandating affordable housing and housing alternatives. And so I look at it as it's 100 square feet. And again, they would have to have the capacity on their lot size to pull that off.
Let's go around this way. So
I would also be okay with raising it. I think for me, especially as I look at ADUs on existing lots, I think, like Councilor Smallwood said, I think there'd have to be space, but I also think that I'm looking at it not from a second house perspective, but additional family space. I'm looking at it as my parents' age. Yeah, exactly. As my parents' age and needing to have them closer to home, what's realistically possible to do in a house, buying a house has an extra 1,000 or 900 or 800 square feet on a one level in a room with them is just not, a possibility. But realistically, could I fit, 600 or 800 square feet in a backyard on one level for them, have a nice bedroom and whatnot? That's a possibility. And so that's kind of really where I look at it as multi-generational.
And I also think, I know the council deals with this, planning commission, we deal with code and that, but affordability and people's, getting more for your dollar. My son's planning on me moving into his basement, but I am not going there. But there are a lot of people out there who do have aging parents or kids who can't afford to buy their own place right now, so they want to build an ADU that, well, once their kids transition out, they can make some money on it in their retirement. They can rent out that unit as an ADU or whatever. And I don't see, like Lori's, the difference between 800 and 900, it's not that much as long as the lot can afford it. And I know we're currently in a moratorium, but this isn't planning for the next 6 months. This is planning the code for long term. And you have to, just because we adopt the code, and even Kelly said you're going to delay adopting it so that you can get the offsets, but you should adopt the code that you want for the future, not just for your moratorium, because eventually, unless they take away all federal grants for sewers, which who knows for the next 4 years that could happen, but unless they take away those federal grants, we're gonna fix our sewer problem. And we want to have the code we want once that moratorium is lifted.
Good point. Just want to clarify, Kelly, ADUs require an ERU separate from the residence?
0.7, just like a multifamily
0.7.
housing unit, yes.
So the question I had, and I could throw this out either to MIG or to Kelly, or if anybody else has thought on it. Now changing the definition of these manufactured homes to fall into the same category as single family and the requirements that come with that group, does that make it more expensive and more unaffordable for a manufactured home? That's a question I have.
No, I don't think that would affect the affordability of a manufactured home by just changing the definition or including it in the definition of single family.
I'm not anti ADUs. I'm fine with adopting this at some point in the future, but what concerns me is that we may, if and when we get 190 more ERUs, after that, there is no federal grants for our sewer. So everybody's gonna, the bills are going up and the affordability is going down. And the idea that we're gonna allow our limited ERUs to go to ADUs that have low occupancy, they're not paying any SDCs according to the proposal. And, I just think we need to kind of get, treat those limited ERUs in a more precocious criteria.
Did you?
Yeah, I would go either way on the change. And it's interesting, we have a guest house on the property of my office in Boring. And I pulled the plans, and it's really nice. It's a 2-bedroom, really nice. I pulled the plans out and did the math on the size, and I was surprised. It was 864 square feet. And I thought, my goodness,
You can get a lot.
that's a lot. And just even thinking of lots in Sandy, how they could put another building on that side, almost impossible. So I don't know the practicality, but going from 800 to 900 is not a big issue.
Yeah, they won't be putting on this on a lot of the newer subdivisions. That's for sure.
Up on stilts, maybe above.
How about this side of the room? Where you guys at?
Well, I'm sorry for arriving late, but I did do a little research on it, but hearing was talking, I would allow it, and I'll tell you why. As far as ADUs go, they can already do one, so you're not adding an extra ADU by adding additional square footage, so it's adding additional square footage would be irrelevant for the ADU side of it. I would like a more defined definition of up to, instead of, I don't understand the allow 800 to 900, it should be more up to 900 square feet instead of just 8 or 9. And then the only thing I didn't agree with was the 75 or 85% of the primary dwelling, because if I own a piece of property and I have a 2,700 square foot house on there and I have an 85% square footprint, I can do 2,200.
Whichever is smaller.
It'd be the small,
says
it is
whichever
the
is
small- it is
smaller.
the smaller of the two limits.
So why not just have up to 900 square feet, period?
Sure.
It's a reasonable.
Would be my only question or suggestion.
Counselor Henley?
My question has to do with parking. If we're adding 100 square feet, does that add another person that is another car that has to be parked?
So I'll provide clarity on a few points.
What if it is
So
a
the current code is 720 square feet. So if you go to 900 square feet, I just want to clarify that's 180 square feet, not 100. We do currently charge SDCs for ADUs. They are at a reduced rate, just like multifamily housing units. Now, the state could come out with future legislation that says we can't charge SDCs for ADUs, but so far we still can. And then the third thing I wanted to say is that with the modifications that were done, I believe it was with House Bill 2001, 3 or 4 years ago, we can no longer require parking for ADUs.
I was waiting for that one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yes, it could go up.
But it could go up anyway.
Sure.
The parking situation's not gonna get better. Council person, what do you say? I need the tax over here.
Yeah. I'm leaning towards not in favor of it. My home is 967 square feet. So having an ADU at 900 square feet, even if it is only 180 or 100 feet, square feet more. It seems like a lot. That would be 2 of my house on my lot,
You
which
wouldn't be allowed
doesn't give
that.
a lot of.
You wouldn't be allowed that because it's 75.
I'm
to
comparing
80%.
the size of my
I'm saying
house
you couldn't
to,
have, because your house is 907 square feet, you couldn't have a 900 square foot ADU. You'd have to have 75% of what your house is, because that would be the lesser amount.
right, my comparison was the size of my floor plan
Mhm.
to an ADU.
You don't want another
Okay.
house like that. sharing on
That's
a
2
lot.
single family homes on the lot.
Right.
That
It's
seems,
more than an ADU at that point.
in my mind, yes, that seems like a larger size, more than we have stipulated for an ADU currently in the code.
As far as my own spot, I probably torn on this one. I could go a little bigger, but I don't want to go too big. I think the big thing for staff is this is going to be controversial.
Sure.
It's not going to be a slam dunk.
I think we have Commissioner O'Leary still with his hand up.
Oh, I'm
We
sorry.
can
I
jump
should
over
probably
to him
look
for
at that, but
feedback.
I didn't log in, so you're
Yeah,
just gonna
you're
have to
good.
tell me.
Pardon me if I should already know this, but I'm curious if with all this, there is a relationship to the lot size or the percentage of the lot that gets built on. In other words, can you just take a lot and meet the setbacks and the building separation and fill it with buildings, or is there a certain percentage for that?
Well, as long as we're talking ADUs, I think it's 1.
We have to allow now with the new House Bill provisions.
Right.
See, may I ask the question, are they allowed in all zoning areas, densities, high, medium, low?
It's a good question. I don't know if they're allowed in the high density. Let me look real quick. I have the code
Figure
right
out how
here.
that would work with townhomes and all that, you know?
Yeah, they are allowed in all the residential zones.
And that seems making.
So,
From a practical standpoint, I'm not sure how you could really
right.
do, I get your point,
Well-
certainly, I just, looking at some of those smaller lots that
Would be
are
a-
Not gonna
would be a
very narrow,
house,
I don't think you could.
an
actually build
undeveloped
something.
or underdeveloped
So,
R3 or
so
something.
that there is potential to do them as basements. We've had a few of those in town. So there is the potential to do them more like stacked. They don't have to be separated from the single family home. And then the other thing to keep in mind is on the high density, some of our high density lots were approved as planned unit developments 20, 30 years ago. And so we do actually have quite a few, I'd say several hundred single family homes on individual lots that are zoned R3 that they could do ADUs potentially. I just wanted to point that
Yeah,
out.
that's a good point. I want to talk about cottage clusters if we can transition to that one, because that's something that's brand new. We haven't talked about that at all. And I'm guessing there's some opinions about it, probably.
What was the topic?
Cottage clusters, the last section that we introduced, the idea that we have 4 to or more detached units in a nice, beautiful looking idyllic setup. I will point out to start this discussion that the code, the drawings that are in there are not to scale and do not accurately reflect the setbacks and the actual setup or density of what would be in there.
One question I had, just for clarification, on the clusters, are they on individual lots or is it one lot?
It's typically, most cities have done them as one lot, multiple houses on one lot. And then typically what they've done is then kind of minimized it. So then they're condos on one lot of record.
So, because that was one of my question that I'd sent into you earlier, was that ownership model. What is this, a rental situation or an ownership situation or both? What does a cottage cluster play to?
Yeah, typically, and if Kelly or Brandon have anything to add to this, please do so. But typically, at least in my experience, from what I've seen, I don't have a lot of, in the 3 jurisdictions I've worked in, there's never been one constructed, so I don't have a lot of practical experience with it. But what I know about it is typically they're on like 1 or 2 lots of record, and then typically they're condos that are then purchased. And a big part of that is because typically they're pretty expensive too.
The HOA.
I built one of these when I
Oh,
was
did you?
16. They didn't call them cottage clusters when I was 16, but that's what it was. And it was basically like a condo where each unit was individually owned, but the common area was under like a homeowner association type thing.
Can I just point out one thing before you guys go into this? Just so you're aware, anywhere that allows multifamily housing currently in our code does allow a cottage cluster, because by definition, you could make a cottage cluster housing all on one lot of record. The high density would be really hard to make a cottage cluster and meet our density regulations. I think you could potentially do it under the R2. But I just wanted to point that out.
It looked like when my son and I talked through this, and he's my mass timber expert that I go to. And so when he reviewed this for me, he looked at it and went, the density looks way off to be cost effective. You would almost always go with a different model for economy perspective.
And I think that's why we don't see a lot of.
There's actually a pretty good example in Silverton. If you Google Silverton cottage clusters, I think they have 12 units. And the challenge that I have with them is, I think in the higher densities, they're appropriate or whatever, but I think there's not that many of them. And so there's some certain issues that come up, like, for example, how much grass do they have to have for each one? Because they all probably have a dog, and and when it's common area, there's issues that kind of come around with that. And so what happens is a lot of the area ends up being developed for either the houses or the fire pits and all the kind of outdoor stuff, and there's not a lot of open space grass to these things. And so that's, I would like to just kind of see, again, we don't have to do anything here with the moratorium, and just kind of see how other people are finding how, problems and, what works, what doesn't work and stuff. I'd like to kind of have that time to kind of figure that out and then proceed when we can have a chance to kind of make our code, incorporate, address any issues that might come up from those. It's kind of new.
Let me add to that. The code associated with this section seems really sketched out, not sketchy, but as like just a draft as opposed to fully thought out, in that there's a lot of unknowns. For instance, there's things approved for the common area, the common building associated with a cluster, like daycare. Well, is that a business? And if it's a business, is it under a completely different set of code, or is it under this cottage cluster code? Or if it's a shared kitchen, does this cottage cluster start to look like a homeless camp? Not a camp, but like a transition model or transition housing or something like that, where more of a distributed group home. Because I just want to make sure that if we're adding code for a cottage cluster with this little picture of, a family and kids playing in the middle, that's what we're driving to, as opposed to something else. I just want to know what we're enabling.
And then while you're doing that, how does the Senate bill and then the House bill associated with housing? What's kind of our directive with the clusters? Like how much actual control with the code do we really have?
So a couple things, I'll jump in. So the most of the draft code language is basically just copied from the state's model code. So again, that's kind of was our starting point. And as I mentioned earlier, the city, there aren't any state requirements for cottage clusters that would apply to Sandy, because Sandy doesn't meet the large city threshold. So that's where the model code applies, is or at least where it's required is for large cities. So Sandy has more flexibility. You can dictate what is and isn't allowed in the open space areas, in the common areas, or in the community building. I'll say that the only requirement that would apply to cottage clusters from the state is just ensuring that whatever standards you do apply to cottage clusters, they have to be clear and objective, because that applies to all forms of housing.
Thank you, Brendan.
Thanks. Other comments? All right, let me ask the $10 million question. What's our priority for moving ahead with any changes to enable or better define cottage clusters? And maybe I'll ask it different. Was there anybody else surprised by this tonight, that we were talking about this?
No, because I think it's I think it's kind of a trend. It's an option.
Okay.
We've talked about cottage clusters in the past. It was something even when we were doing our comprehensive plan that came up, the cottage cluster model. So I wasn't surprised to see it. I guess the question is, if it's not cost effective and it's not affordable, then
Why spend a lot of time
people
on
aren't
it?
gonna do it, and why spend a lot of time on it? Yeah.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Would this be, so I heard on the ADU, there's mixed feelings, but we'll probably advance that as a potential strategy in the HPS. Is there any, and because I just want to know from you guys, because if there's none, that's fine, but is there any interest in advancing cottage clusters as a strategy during the HPS? Because if there's not,
With clarification.
I'll just take it off of the potential list, and if there is, we can explore it.
I'm reluctant, since there's a whole lot of questions we'll have to work through, but that's my opinion.
I would argue, if you can convince me that the condominium is gonna add accessible or affordable housing in Sandy, then I would be all for cottage cluster. Because I think if there's a need for it, there's a need for it
Right.
in our community for that pricing. But you haven't convinced me that that's gonna be available.
I also
at that
wanna-
price point.
Want to clarify or add to what Kelly just said too. Part of the HPS isn't going to be modify your code and build cottage clusters. It's going to be, yeah, I made a note here. How did I say that? Evaluate, the viability of incorporating cottage clusters into your code. And so I think to the question that Kelly's asking, like, is there any interest in continuing this discussion, not necessarily to make a formal decision, but to continue to explore it as part of the housing production strategy? And a lot of that HPS is going to be, I don't want to say theoretical, but it's evaluating and exploring ideas to build affordable housing. And
I just feel like we got so much stuff to be focusing on, and there's a lot of issues that, you would need to refine that to make it more suitable with the apartments and all, the common space and all those other things that we need to kind of get ironed out. And I just feel like, from a density standpoint, I would rather see apartments that are, more efficient and and higher density get built there than have these cottage clusters that are fewer units. And again, it all goes back to these ERUs, because, it's important to kind of utilize the land in the most efficient way and get as many units as possible, given the allocation of the zoning and the densities.
So, and if it's not cost effective, I'm going to try to paraphrase what I've heard from a few of us. If it's not cost effective, it doesn't seem like it's something we should prioritize until such time that trends show it to be cost effective, and then maybe come back to it. Does that address, if we were to not proceed this, do you still need to?
My
wanna
question
comment?
is, it seems like a lot of the work's done for us. We need to check things off our housing strategy. This isn't likely going to happen, but if a lot of the work's done, on Kelly's point, and us exploring it, I mean, what's the harm in advancing something that we can initially check off if it's not a lot of work and it's not gonna happen anyways?
I guess my fear is it's going to be a lot of work. I think that's.
Sure, I mean, that was where my question was, is if we do advance this, what's the amount of work versus what's our reward in getting to check something off in our housing strategy?
I spent 30 minutes reading through the code and came up with a list of questions this big. I think each one of them would take a work session to work through what you want to do with them.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
And I think especially since it sounded like we would be able to, because of our city size, throttle it down to our likings. And that just translates into much more work.
Right.
I'll speak to in terms of cottage clusters cost effectiveness and other city sizes that have adopted this. I know multiple there have been quite a few cottage clusters that have been getting developed in kind of similar sized peer communities. Silverton was mentioned earlier. Lebanon is currently in the process of allowing cottage clusters, and they've had inquiries from interested developers and property owners, and I know several communities on the coast. I know their kind of economy and demographics is a little bit different than Sandy, but all that to say, it may not be entirely cost effective or feasible for Sandy right now, but as I think somebody mentioned earlier, you want to plan for your code for the future and not necessarily within the next 6 months. So it's kind of preparing for
Run out of time, but yeah, we do want to plan for the future, but we also want to prioritize for now and our current set of priorities. So I don't think we're saying no to cottage clusters forever, but I suspect that if we had a developer very interested in doing a cottage cluster, we could bring that up and spin up and look at it pretty quick, I would think.
I mean,
I would rather see us do fire safety, make our homes and all more fire safe and do those kind of code changes. That seems a good use of our time while we have the moratorium.
So if I could propose to the council and the planning commission, I think how I will advance it for the HPS is it will probably just be one of many potential strategies. And at one of your work sessions in the future, you can decide at that time if you want to advance it any further or take it off the list. And at that point, I won't have spent any time on modifying the code. It'll just be, here's something we talked about in the past. Do you want to kick it off the list or include it to move forward?
Does that work for everybody?
Yes, yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Brandon and DLCD. Kelly, thanks. Thanks for being here. We'll adjourn, take 5 minutes and meet back at 7:07. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Council meeting. Let's do the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Let's do the roll call.
Okay, Councilor Mayton. Present. Councilor Smallwood. Here. Councilor Sheldon. I believe is excused absence. Okay. Councilor Ramsayer.
Here.
Councilor Hanley.
Here.
Mayor Walker is
she online yet or not?
not online.
Okay, so excused.
Okay, and then Council President Hoganson.
Here. Thanks. All right, for the agenda tonight, do I need to go over it again? I don't, do I? We just dive in, right?
Totally your discretion.
Cool, we're diving in. Any response to comment? Well, first of all, for public comments, just note that, Jeff, do we have anybody who submitted online or earlier or
No, not today.
otherwise?
Nope.
No forms, okay. With that, we'll skip right into the response to previous comments.
Yeah, so we had 2 public comments provided at the last council meeting. The first was Austin Ernesti with a sort of request for funding for his chainsaw event, waiting to get a formal request. So no real response to that other than we'll provide that to the council once we have it and go through that request process. And then the second public comment we had at the last meeting was from Jim Gaither. As a reminder, he is the contractor potentially working on the old Sunset Church site. Staff is working with him on the documents that he has submitted, and I don't really know where we're at other than just kind of going back and forth and answering questions at this point. So
Communication is active and ongoing,
active and ongoing.
so we like to hear.
Is he still relying on you to communicate with the property owner, or is he taking the reins?
No, I provided an update on my communication with the property owner and then turned it back over to staff to answer ongoing questions related to the specifics of that site.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah. Thanks. So for the consent agenda, I just wanted to note an important part of that because part of this is the goal setting minutes. These are the minutes, not the actual goals. So we'll be figuring the goals themselves out later. So with that, on the consent agenda, city council goal setting minutes, February 1, 2025, and the city council minutes from our meeting on February 3rd, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
So a motion from Council Smallwood and seconded by Council Layton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Good. All right, we have a presentation from the Mount Hood Community College. Are they here? You are here.
Yes.
Welcome. I should say, welcome back.
Welcome back. That's right.
Just trying to remember how many new council members we have.
2 new faces.
So we need.
So, good evening. So, good evening, Council President Don Hawkinson.
That's a mouthful. Dawn's fine. Thank you.
I'm Diane Noriega, and I am on the Board of Education for Mount Hood Community College and also a proud resident of Sandy. And I am joined tonight by our college president. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, Lisa Scari, President of Mount Hood Community College, also a resident of San. So thank you for having us back. This will be short, but we wanted to provide you an update. Last spring, when we were out and gave you a presentation of what the college was thinking about, you gave us some feedback, which the board took and listened to along with the other feedback they collected throughout the district. Since we last met, there has been considerable community engagement and outreach. In fact, over the last months, I think the board and members have made over 67 presentations about the bond to figure out what people were thinking and collect thoughts.
And as a result, we heard from the community that the community values the college and they wanted more information about our impact. We realized there was a need to share that the MHCC bond is not just a financial measure, it's a commitment to strengthening our local economy, expanding educational opportunities for all people that want to come, and ensuring that our residents have access to high quality facilities and services. On January 15th, the board voted unanimously to put a 136, so it's a big number, bond measure on the May 2025 ballot.
So why this bond matters, just briefly. To Mount Hood Community College really serves kind of as the cornerstone around economic development, education and community engagement in our region. With our enrollment increasing and our infrastructure aging, we're kind of at this critical point where our ability to provide quality education is getting more challenging and is at risk. And as a reminder, this bond is going to allow us to accomplish 4 things broadly. Is to upgrade and modernize our classrooms and facilities. And this will ensure that our students have access to modern spaces and learning environments. Second, to expand our career and technical education programs, directly aligning with local industry needs and preparing a skilled workforce. The third area is improving campus safety and accessibility, creating an environment where all of our students, employees, and community members can thrive. And lastly, to invest in sustainable and cost-effective infrastructure improvements, reducing long-term operational costs, increasing efficiencies, and improving environmental responsibility.
This $136 million bond was designed to focus just on the essentials. We're not building new buildings. We're taking the buildings that we have, bringing them up to date to the 21st century, making them safer, and using them more effectively. But it also is very reasonable ask. Because the district is so large, we estimate that it will be 25 cents per $1,000 of the assessed value of homes. Or on average, about $5 a month for the average homeowner. But it also brings positive and economic community impact. Supporting this bond is an investment in our local economy. MHCC produces skilled graduates who contribute to our businesses, our hospitals, public services. For example, last year we graduated 236 healthcare workers. 66 of those were nurses. We also produced an additional 27 cybersecurity specialists, 18 automotive technicians, and 47 childcare workers, to name a few. And I just want to insert a personal note here. I have, you know, at my age, I've had certain parts have, you know, just failed me. And I've had to have knee replacement, physical therapy. I'm in the hospital. I asked the nurse, where did you get your license, your degree? Mount Hood. And next thing I know, there's a little parade of nurses coming through my room to say hi. I tell them I'm on the board. My physical therapist went through the physical therapy program at Mount Hood. So, you know, everywhere you go, if you ask, you'll find out how, you know, how much of an impact we have. You too. There you go. Go ahead, Lisa.
So through the improved facilities, we can strengthen our programs and close critical labor gaps. In fact, Mount Hood Community College is the number 1 provider of higher education in our region and in our area. And in a single year, our alumni contribute about $350 million back to the local economy through their wages. Additionally, we'll see gains through the contracts we have through, right, if we're doing construction, it'll generate additional jobs for people in our community and enhance our property values. We see this as an opportunity to leverage the public investment for long-term growth and sustainability.
We recognize the importance of fiscal responsibility. This bond has been carefully structured to maximize community benefits while minimizing taxpayer burden. Strong financial oversight and accountability measures are in place to ensure that funds are used efficiently and effectively. The PAC, who is, you know, we're working on supporting this measure, is to have the support of every city council member in the MHCC district. I am respectfully asking for your support by endorsing this bond and encouraging your constituents to invest in the future of our region. By voting in favor of the MHCC bond, we are ensuring that education remains accessible, our workforce remains competitive, and our community remains strong. We thank you for your time and your commitment to the residents of Sandy. As they say, we welcome any questions you might have, and we appreciate your leadership in helping us move forward together.
Thank you. Any questions?
How long is the bond?
It's like 20 point something years. It's like 34 or 43, something odd.
Is there any concern about council support for their measure in May? Anybody have any concerns about what that might look like? This would be the time to voice it.
I was gonna ask more, we didn't receive a draft of the bond, right? I haven't seen it.
We can send you a detailed list of the project.
I just have a hard time supporting something I haven't read myself. I take what you say very sincerely, and I haven't graduated on it. But I wanted to read something before I would offer my support for it personally.
I do have some handy highlights.
Perfect, thank you. So specifically, you're asking for support from every city council member within your area, but what does that mean? Are you looking for a some sort of a council statement? What does support mean to you from us? What can we do to help you?
I'm deferring to her because as a public
She cannot.
employee, I can't speak. about
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
So that's
you're
okay,
you're
which
with
is
the PAC.
fair.
I'm the advocate.
Okay,
Yeah. It's,
I understand.
yeah. So we, you know, what we're asking, and we bring forms along, you don't have to fill them out tonight, but at least you would have to fill out this official endorsement form for the bond. And so I can leave these with you. You can think about it.
Why don't we leave them with Jeff? And how does everyone feel about if we get the information from them and we look at the details, doing like a council resolution of support so that we can do it once instead of all this filling the form out individually? Is that acceptable with everyone? You know, would that work? All right. Is the mayor online or not?
She is.
She has
Okay.
joined me, yes.
So I'm not looking at her, but if you can tell me if she's okay with that too, that would be good.
She's unmuting now.
All right.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Uh-huh.
Thanks. All right, so we'll, you get us the information, we'll circulate it, we'll come back with
Absolutely.
a resolution and maybe put a nice little spot on our website.
I'll get that to you right away.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank
being here.
you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you both.
Thank you. And for all you do. I mean, I think all of
Yeah.
us have kids, or if it wasn't our kids, you know, maybe it's us or somebody who has been there or is going there or something. So it's great. And you have a pool too, so we like that. No, Brittany, you can't use the last part.
You're in a public meeting.
All right, let's hit up the old business. Kelly. Tyler, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just briefly, say the council will likely recall that we did the first reading of ordinance 2025-03 at the last council meeting. This one before you this evening is taking the revisions that were indicated at the last council meeting, incorporating those revisions into the ordinance, and hoping to get a second reading this evening. Kelly will walk through what those exact changes and modifications were. And we'll take from there.
All right.
Thank you, Councilor Hookinson. So if you just turn to the staff report, the main thing that you want to take a look at is the key considerations analysis section, which is in the middle of the page. And so there was 2 modification requests with chapter 5.04 for the second reading tonight. The first one was in section 5.04.02, and that was simply to flip A and B. And that is reflected on, sorry, printed these double-sided. That is reflected on page 53 of the packet. The second code modification was the
Wait,
section.
Tell us the why behind it.
This was a request from Mayor Walker to flip A and B so that the revenue assistance in defraying the city costs would come second after the obtaining the valuable information in A.
Under the purpose, perfect.
Correct.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. The second modification was to section 5.04.140 D1. This was the conversation that we had around, I'm trying to find the page number here. This is on page 60 of the packet. This was the conversation we had around residential rental property license requirements and the council's desire to have some additional information in section D stating in D1 stating that while these uses don't have to apply for a residential rental property license, they are still required to apply for a business license.
Okay.
So that was the modification to that section.
Thanks. Any other changes that we should? be
And
aware of?
those were the only changes.
All right. So does that mean we have?
So the hearing has been closed. Yeah, any discussion the council may want to have, and then when you're ready, you can ask me to read it for a second time.
Discussion?
They already had it.
Read away.
Okay, Council President, this is ordinance 2025-03, an ordinance amending chapter 5.04, business licenses and regulation of the Sandy Municipal Code.
I move to approve the second reading of ordinance 2025-03 as amended. I'll second that.
All right. Motion from Councillor Ramsayer and a second from Councillor Hanley. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I think, any opposed? All right, excellent. Motion, ordinance passed. Continuing on,
Yeah, so next up, also follow up from the February 3rd council meeting, ordinance 2025-04 as it relates to chronic nuisance properties. We did the first reading, but we're provided with some modifications that you'd like to incorporate. Kelly and his staff incorporated those modifications. He can run through what those modifications were, and then we'll respectfully request a second reading so we can knock this one out as well.
Go for it.
Thank you. So so again, if you look at the key considerations analysis section, it's on the middle of the staff report, on the first page of the staff report. There was 3 modifications that were requested by the council. The first modification is to section 82210 1, 2, and 3. This request, I believe, also came from the mayor, and it was a really good request to increase the time period for which the nuisance activities can occur. And we increased it. The request from the council was to increase it from 30 days to 6 months. Just because of how the municipal code talks about days, I figured it would actually be better to have the actual day period specified. So I put 180 days on all 3 of these.
And I think as we
subsections.
discussed, where it's not labeled, that is calendar days.
That's correct.
Okay.
The second code modification, I believe, was also a request from the mayor. This is on page 67 of your packet. It is section 82210C19, so it's a new one. This one I worked with the attorney's office, Police Chief Husky, and also Police Chief Husky contacted the Oregon Humane Society. We also looked at a few other codes around the state of Oregon to get an idea of how they wrote this section up. And so this new provision would be an additional nuisance activity tied to animal abuse, neglect, abandonment, fighting, unlawful tethering, and sexual assault of an animal, and dog fighting, sorry. And so that was added as a potential nuisance activity as requested by the mayor. And then we added all the ORSs and had those looked at by our attorney's office. The third modification is to section 82230B5C. And that, sorry, look too far. And that it was a request by, I think, Councilor Hokanson and the mayor, I think the majority of the council actually on this one. When we were reading the procedure section. What's that?
What page is this on?
It's on page 68 of the packet.
Thank you.
So if you recall, when we were reading through the procedure section of B, after you got, I think, down to number 4 within that section, it kind of didn't have some information that was then included in section C down below, and it made you refer back up into B. And so it's kind of the circular confusion. So we had the city attorney's office, Josh wrote all this, so I didn't actually write this, but B 4, 5, and 6 were removed, and instead C 1, 2, 3, and 4 were added to provide additional clarity as requested by the council. And if you have any questions about that, I would turn to Josh on that actually.
Anything else that we should be aware of?
Those were the 3 code edits. And then, I'm sorry, Counselor. And then on the other item where we talked about adding even more nuisance activities, I've already requested our code enforcement officer, he's already researching that, so. When
But
you
that's
guys,
not included now.
correct,
Okay.
but we had discussed last meeting, I just wanted to give you an update that we're already moving forward with the research on it.
We'll get the housekeeping stuff taken care of now and then come back again in the near future with some other punches.
Any discussion? Same story?
Different first.
All right. Then,
Okay.
please reading.
Yes, ordinance number 2025-04, an ordinance amending Sandy Municipal Code, Chapter 8.22, chronic nuisance properties.
Motions?
You're on roll. No?
Oh, I move to approve the second reading of ordinance 2025-4 as amended.
I second it.
All right, motion made by Councilor Ramsayer and seconded by the mayor, who doesn't get to do that very often.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I allowed to do that tonight?
You
I
can.
can pass it
That's
to somebody else.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Ordinance passed. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Josh, for helping us get that right.
Yeah.
And Chief Husky.
All right, moving on, new business. The task order engineering evaluation.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, thank you, Council President.
Don't go there, man.
Habit, man. Apologies.
I like my seat where it's over there.
So while AJ's getting settled in, I'll just do a brief opening here. As the council's aware, the city is, evaluating the viability of a pipeline to Gresham to treat our wastewater flows. Part of the work that needs to be done in the near future or the very short term is two different pieces. The first topic at hand this evening is evaluating Sandy's wastewater flows on Gresham's treatment plant. So we have some information on the available capacity at Gresham's treatment plant. We know what our flows are, but we need to do a full engineering evaluation to ensure that Gresham's plant can reliably and feasibly take our wastewater flows here. And so the intent with this task order is to have that analysis completed. AJ, I don't want to steal your thunder though, so go ahead and jump on in.
Okay, so as Tyler said, after the December 2nd meeting, at council's direction, we pursued this option of getting wastewater flows to Gresham. The task order 3 that we're talking about first here is the evaluation of Gresham's wastewater treatment plant, specifically regarding the flows from Sandy and their effect on the existing plant there. Gresham's treatment plant is coming up on being due for a full master plan. And in this instance, with Sandy's need for speed, for lack of a better term, we are performing this evaluation instead of piggybacking it into Gresham's wastewater treatment plant, master plan or facilities plan. I want to apologize. I keep mixing Gresham and Sandy up in my head, with my past. So from this point, we are asking the council to approve a task order to appoint this work to our Stantec team. We've done the legwork and determined that this is it's fine under procurement laws. The WIFIA team, which would be funding this, has no issues with this method of procurement. And this does not have an effect on the overall Clean Waters budget, as this is funds that we would be spending in a way where you're just appointing it to Stantec instead of going out to bid with another consultant. The deliverable from this will be an assessment of Gresham's treatment plant and what the effect of our flow would be on it. And if there's any upgrades that are required due to our flow of the plant, it would be an estimation of cost. So it would help us make our informed decision going forward.
You want to go? And AJ, and you would also share with me that Stantec's team has some special expertise to be able to perform this work. If you wanted to share that as well.
Correct. So the Stantec team that will be appointing to this work has some experience with Gresham's treatment plant in the past. They also have the experience of working with our plant, so they know all the details of our flow that we have that we're concerned about.
So that should translate into faster and cheaper, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And
shared
credibility
knowledge
with Gresham as well. So in
That's
terms of accepting the
probably
results. Yeah.
As important as anything, given what we've seen with the EPA and other credibility crises.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, having them on board from the start instead of trying to defend a report that they didn't have any involvement in is going to save us a lot of time and energy several months from now.
And so, as I said before, there's no net increase to our budget, but this will be an addition of $332,198.20 to the Stantec budget for this task order.
So moving money that would have been spent on the Sandy River outfall to this task instead.
Anything else?
And we also have Dick Talley online as well.
Are you ready for questions?
Yeah, I'm ready for questions. Sorry.
I guess the last thing I would point out is we did share this task order with the wastewater oversight committee. Was that last week? Last week, which includes Mayor Walker, Council President Hokinson, and Councilor Mayton. So there was some initial discussion around the move of these funds and the reason behind this with that group. I believe we answered any questions that came up during that meeting, and there was general support for getting this study taken care of and ensuring that we do have a viable path forward. So just want to throw that out there.
Discussion, questions? Everybody clear what we're doing and why?
I've got two. So just to clarify, the money that you're asking to spend isn't an additional spend from the WIFIA, it's just a reallocation from moving it from one place to another.
Yeah, it increases
Correct.
the sizes of Stantec's contract, right? But it's not
But
new
not
money
the
for the
overall.
program. We're moving, yeah.
And then what's the timeline for a return on that report?
Was it AJ?
Because I
This
didn't see it
one-
written in there.
Yeah.
I didn't miss it.
This one
it's kind of weird.
is
Had the same question.
September, yes.
I think the end of September is the answer.
Oh,
to
no,
that
sorry,
question.
end of October. I've got them backwards. End of October for the treatment plan analysis.
Is that
of
written
this year.
in this,
It is in the key considerations and analysis in the staff report.
It's in their scope
in
as
the
well. I
scope
can
as
find it
well.
for you here in a second.
I just wanted to make sure we had a timeline on it,
Yeah.
because I know that's important.
So the very last page
It's-
where it has the budget overview, you can see up at the top where it says the end date listed as October 31st, 2025.
Page 81,
Oh, thank you for that.
Exhibit B.
Yeah, the last thing that I would add to this, conversation is that we also need to have this analysis completed so that we can determine what a potential connection fee to Gresham System would look like. So as you'll all recall, we kind of have this range of what a possible connection fee to Gresham System could look like. And in order to really hammer out that IGA and get a connection fee sort of identified and honed in on, we need to understand capacity available, how much of that would we be buying. And so this is a key piece to determining the overall viability, not just can you take it or not, but what are you going to charge us to buy in? Can you take it? Can you treat it? All of those components sort of linked together.
So this is a major step towards being able to make the decision that we're headed down the Gresham path. I think it's important for people to recognize that the decision, we're not able to make the decision yet because we don't have all the information. We have to pay money to get the information we need to make the decision. And in the event that we feel good about this option, but in the event it doesn't pencil out, things fall apart, then we're back to the Sandy River outfall, and this money potentially would have been wasted. in that-
That's right.
in that
That's the
example.
risk.
And that's the reality of having two options and having to spend money to figure out what the best option is.
I just underline that I think that, so in this year, we're really gonna have three things running in parallel. We're gonna have, if the council agrees, we'll be running this study. We'll, if the council agrees, also be running the pipeline alignment and pump station study that talk about next. And then as the year progresses, we'll start negotiating an intergovernmental agreement with Gresham as well. So with all of these things hopefully wrapped up by the end of the year, that's the goal.
By the end of the year, we should have a path forward. We will have a path forward. We just hope it's the one we're moving on.
And the key piece of the end of the year is we have until December 31st to get the EPA to buy off on our facility plan amendment, the preferred alternative, all of that, the extension that we requested sunsets on December 31st of 2025. So we've got a timeline in place to act quickly, get good partners on board, get all this work hammered out, all of this year so that we can really set the path forward and hit the ground running.
Cool. Any other discussion? Then I gotta go back to the top. Then we are at motion to approve?
I do have one more question.
I'll go for it while I'm figuring out where I'm at, so please.
I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but the next one you're gonna go over, is the financials the same way?
That's what I was trying to, that's what I'm sitting here looking at, because the money amount. Is
'Cause
in
I don't wanna
addition to,
start
or
to-
is it encompassed in that same?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so when we look at sorry, let me pull it up here. Or AJ, do you want to field
Yeah,
that?
asking.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just hard for me to approve it at $330,000 if the next one's, I'm approving another 200 and
So
something.
I'm fine moving on to the second agenda item first and then coming back to the.
Just so that we know that the money's all coming from. the
Everybody okay with that?
same place.
Let's talk about the second one.
Because I had the same question.
Sure.
And quick question for the council, would it be better if we have a situation like this in the future to just lump them into a single staff report and simplify matters?
Well, I don't mind the separate
Okay.
reporting, it's just knowing that the financial means are whether it's all cumulative or not,
Because like when we're saying not to exceed, those numbers are identical, so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Is this the amount, or do we have two separate amounts here?
That may have been confusing. Apologies for that. So
That's
when you
okay.
see not to
That's why I'm
exceed,
asking.
yeah, so when you see the not to exceed going from 3.5 to 4.1 million, that includes both. So we
And that's
assumed
what I
you would want to
assumed.
know the bottom line number. That's
Yep.
the bottom line number.
And essentially, we need both of these. to
So
get together.
I would say in this
It is a
particular case, one
Yeah.
report probably would have been more accurate.
Okay, thank you very much.
If they're different, different enough where the numbers aren't dependent on each other, then separate them. Okay. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, well, and I'm okay separating, how you did it is just fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're gonna get there,
yep.
just fine.
Hey, do you want to, oh, good.
Well,
Sorry.
I'll just jump in and say, so the second component this evening is the engineering routing study for the wastewater conveyance to Gresham. So again, 14 miles of pipeline. We need to do this engineering routing to determine where that pipeline would fall. Is it all in the right of way? Is it a private property? What's any sort of environmental impacts and stream crossings or anything like that need to happen? And so this is, again, a very vital piece to understanding the total project cost. We need to have a good idea of where the pipe's going to go so we can get estimates on construction costs and determine the viability on that aspect. So all of this kind of goes hand in hand. Every piece is linked to the next piece. And so for us to really have a, sound footing going forward, we need to get this preliminary engineering study completed as well.
And with that, will that include all of the plethora of permitting that we're gonna have to do?
So the answer to that is this will determine what permits are required to get us from one spot to the other.
It won't include the effort to get the plans.
I understand that, but it will include
Right.
what permits exactly?
It will identify the
Which,
next step of
which
will-
and
the
whom and
project.
how many?
Yeah, which will help us with our cost estimate for the project.
And I had a question. Is there variability in this project of where we're connecting?
Mayor Walker, that is exactly what we're planning to do here. We have a general idea of what our route will be from Sandy to Gresham, and then there are some alternatives analysis available for once we get to Gresham city limits, how far into Gresham we go, whether that's all the way to the plant or if there's some points we could connect to within their collection system, which will also, as we were talking about earlier, determine what our connection fee is for the city of Sandy to connect to Gresham. If we're using their collection system infrastructure, there will be a higher cost associated with that.
Okay, and so we'll have options and costs associated with those different options, right?
That is correct. The final result that we'll get out of this report will be after we've run an alternatives analysis based on a few factors, cost estimation, time of, I don't have it in front of me at the moment, the time that it takes to build it, the permitting efforts, all these type of things. We will have, the report will not dictate, will recommend one option for the city to go forward with. And then to be clear, this is not a design of the pipeline. We're going to be using LiDAR to determine the elevations, and we're going to get the plan on paper so that somebody can come through afterwards and we can get this design built. Finally, this is in the same budget situation where these are funds that would be spent in they're already budgeted in the Clean Waters budget, and they're now shifting from the Sandy River project to the Sandy to Gresham project. The total for this one is $279,166. And with both of these projects going forward, this will bring the Stantec budget from its existing up to $4,188,617.51.
Okay, thanks.
I think the other
More
piece.
questions?
If I can just add one thing, I think the other piece to note here is that, we have this great working relationship with Stantec. If we hit a roadblock for whatever reason with City of Gresham or anything else, we can stop this work. We're not, paying $279,000 and then getting a study that we can't use if we find out in 6 weeks from now that this isn't an option, right? So just want to make sure that that's clear, that we've got the
That's
flexibility.
a
to-
function of the not to exceed and the
Yeah.
relation, the more or less time and materials effort that we're doing with them, right?
Yep.
Exactly. Correct. Any questions from the council?
Mine would just be, again, dates of completion, make sure I got this right. It says project schedule completion for task 2 would be July 31st, 2025. And the completion for task 1 is the same date of July 31st. So conceptually, in August, we should have in front of us a list of alternative options of routes to Gresham.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
I saw the first one we talked about had a completion date in October.
Yeah, where's July?
We've got October is the completion date for the study of the treatment plant. And
Okay.
then I have this in here as, I
Page 94
And then the other one is July.
says July 31st.
believe I have September in my stuff.
For these 2 tasks.
All feeding together for that December decision. All right, I will just point out in our discussions in the committee, one of the things we talked about that I hadn't really thought about is that line from here to there has to go uphill in parts. So part of that line at least will be pressurized, and we did talk about the need, and they were already thinking about this, but to build redundancy into this so that if one half, instead of one big pipe, maybe 2 small pipes, smaller pipes, so that one can be taken out of service during certain times of the year for maintenance, that sort of thing. So it was nice to see them thinking about such things as they're starting this early work, so. All right, any other, if not, I'll entertain a motion, if I can remember where I was at. Jeez. Kathleen, how do you keep track of this?
71.
All right, motion. For the first one, we need to, or second, whichever.
For the
we'll
first
start
one?
with. Yeah, let's start with that.
So I make a motion to do task order approval for engineering evaluation of sanitary wastewater flows of Gresham's treatment plant.
Second.
All right, motion from Counselor Mayton, second from Counselor Smallwood, all in favor?
Aye.
Nays? Did we get the mayor's vote?
Yep, voting yes.
Thank you.
Noted, thank you.
All right, motion passes. Moving on to the next one.
And again, task order approval, I make a motion to approve the engineering routing study for wastewater conveyance to Gresham.
Do I hear a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Counselor Mayton with the motion and Counselor Ramsayer with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Do I have to do nays if I heard all the yays, so.
I'd say that's within your discretion as
All
presiding
right,
officer.
it passed. Everyone said yay. I heard it. Okay, next item.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, AJ. Appreciate
it.
Thank you.
And just for the record, this is Sandy, that's Gresham, Okay.
All right, next up, we have an IGA for approval with Clackamas County for the hiring of an additional community services officer. So some background here, you may recall, 13 months or so ago, I sent out a nice email that said, hey, we got some grant funding from the county to hire a community services officer to specialize in homelessness response and really be that liaison between the homeless community and the service providers in our community. Took a very long time to get an IGA drafted and finalized, but here we are this evening finally. Imagine that. So here we are this evening for approval or authorization of that IGA. So some background on this position, clearly I think there is a need for someone to help prioritize and liaison with the homeless community and make sure that they are receiving services or know of the services in our community or the surrounding area. Historically, we did have an Officer Argybright before he retired, that was taking an active role in that area. He retired in August. And since that time, that work has sort of just fallen on whoever is on duty. We don't have a specific person really tasked with that. Code enforcement, our community services officer, Moody, is certainly the primary who is making contact almost on a daily basis, if not a daily basis, with people that are camping down in the Industrial Way area, but certainly there's other homeless individuals in our community beyond just the Industrial Way section of town. And so primarily what the vision for this new community services officer is to be able to be that one point of contact, allow our sworn officers to respond to more serious crime and police report and incidences that they have the expertise to respond to, and allow for the community services officer to be that point person for dealing with any issues that arise that are non-violent, non-criminal, or lower on the spectrum of severity. The other key component to this that I think will be really helpful for the police department is having a second community services officer will allow for, with modification of the existing schedule, will allow for a community services officer to be on 7 days a week, so we can shake things up a little bit with the schedule in the police department. And that's going to help with, two things, right? It's the homeless response from a 7-day-a-week perspective, but also just any other code compliance issues that come up that the police department works on. We'll have someone here 7 days a week to actually respond to those instead of taking a name and number, or getting an email and then not being able to follow up for 2 or 3 days. The total grant funding coming from Clackamas County is $292,352 over the course of 3 years. That covers 80% of the anticipated cost of the community services officer, as well as 80% of the vehicle acquisition costs for a new vehicle for this person. So the city of Sandy's on the hook for 20%. Which equates to approximately $73,088 over 3 years. We will include that $73 or the relevant component in the upcoming budget process. The other key piece to that is that the city of Sandy has received opioid settlements.
Thank you. That's what I was going to ask, because I thought that was the decision that we made.
Yeah.
We were going to use the opioid money to fund this position.
So we've received, and I don't have the total dollar amount that we've received today. It's in excess of the 73,000 that this is expected to cost over 3 years. And so we've received more than that to date. We anticipate receiving additional opioid funding over the next, several years as those settlements continue to roll in. Part of the use of those settlement funds has to be dealing with the opioid crisis. And so we'll be tracking and ensuring that we can make a reasonable link between addiction and some of the services that this person will be providing or facilitating.
I suspect you can.
I suspect we can as well. So I think from a budget perspective, we're not seeking additional general fund revenue to offset the cost of this person. We have those funds already being received, and we'll continue to receive those funds. And so really the question or request before the council this evening is to authorize the city manager to sign the IGA between the city of Sandy and Clackamas County for homelessness response and outreach. Happy to answer any specific questions you have. I guess I will add too, we already posted the recruitment notice for this position that closed on Friday. I think we had 18 applicants, so strong interest. HR and Chief Husky will be reviewing those applications over the next week or so. And so we're ready to move forward and get this thing going. It's been a long
What's the
year.
timeline to get somebody in position? Do we have a generalized month sort of timeline?
I would say roughly 2 months.
Yeah, by the time we get applications reviewed,
Backgrounds,
schedule interviews,
Yeah.
do backgrounds, certainly it's a less robust recruitment process than a sworn officer. But we still want to make sure we're hiring the right person and no
Right.
questionable things in their background come up. And then, of course, allowing them time to provide notice to their current employer. And so a few months still, but we're going as quick as we can on this side of it now.
What happens to this position after the 3 years of funding is?
Great question. So that's somewhat to be determined. Part of how Clackamas County got funding for rural Clackamas County cities like us, Estacada, Canby, and Malala, was a shift in Metro supportive housing dollars. And so Metro supportive housing, or the Metro region rather, covers the more urban cities in Clackamas County. So the county got some additional funding from Metro to provide homeless services in the urban areas. So the county shifted the money that they had internally allocated to the urban areas to the rural areas. If that practice continues, which hopefully it will, because there's a need everywhere, not just in urban or rural areas, right? There's a need across the board. If Metro continues that model, then I am hopeful that we would continue to see some grant funding from the county. That's certainly not 100% guaranteed. I think this 3-year period will allow us really the time to see what programs and services are being offered that work and what programs and services are offered that don't work, and can help us hone in on really what's our role in that piece. The city isn't really a social service organization, right? But we pick up the pieces where social service organizations don't meet all of the need. And so part of the next 3 years will really just be establishing what exactly is the need, and having someone who can routinely be that point of contact will be able to get much better data on what are the services that are being most sought. What are the areas where we just don't see anyone taking those services. It will also give more time for Metro supporting housing dollars to kick in, and whether that's building transitional housing or low income housing and more of that coming online, which would hopefully alleviate some of the homelessness concerns and population that we have. So a long way of saying, don't know yet, but I think a lot of that will come to light as we figure out exactly what the need is and what other options are available.
Recognizing that it's gonna fluctuate, how much money from the opioid reimbursement are we getting annually?
That is a great question. And I can tell you what we've received, so far
If we could earmark it.
this fiscal year. I mean, those funds have to be used for opioid response.
That's my point, is I'm wondering if, because we are going to collect that money for a while. And so that's what I'm wondering, is we could earmark those funds for this position. And just set those funds aside, knowing that.
We don't want to end up with the Estacada situation.
No. But that we'd have a long-term funding mechanism in the event.
Yeah, we can put together some projections on how much we think we'll, collect over the
In
next
other
several
words,
years.
when you bring the budget proposal forward, don't eat up all that money somewhere else.
We don't have a plan to eat up that money somewhere else.
Again, it
right
has to be
now.
used for opioids.
It has to-
So-
so
We
if-
also had a
if-
plan to add
well,
more
but
officers
that
to
can be
our
broad.
budget, so I mean.
It can
there's
be
a
broad.
lot of
It
things
can be
pushing
broad.
that way.
Our intent is to, be as true to the letter of what those opioid funds were meant for, which is to respond to the opioid crisis, right? And not to just have some nice gray area that we can use them elsewhere. So, certainly if we need to purchase some more Narcan or other, I can't think of the right word that I'm looking for, anti-drug. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the word that I want to say.
We have to purchase Narcan, the county gives it out by the handful.
County gives it out by the handful. We have purchased for a different department before that relationship was established with getting it by the handful. We had purchased some for the library, I believe it was, in case there was a overdose there.
Nope, that's a great application, yeah.
So, I mean, if there's areas like that come up, we'll certainly utilize opioid funding for those types of
Absolutely,
services.
yeah.
And certainly as we get through this process further, if there's another organization locally that responds or provides those services, we could look at grant funding from the city to that organization if we needed to do some sort of relationship like that. But all that to say, we're going to use this for opioid response.
And I would hope that we would look, going down that path, that we would look at the county healthcare facility that's right here in town.
There's a lot of money coming.
Well, and in
Down
3
pipe,
years,
right?
we don't know where we're gonna be with the
Right.
homeless situation. I mean,
Solved?
that is very hopeful and rainbows and unicorns.
Let's hope it's less.
Let's hope it's less.
Let's hope we're moving in
But-
a
Hope we got
positive
ahead of
direction
it.
and not a negative one.
I think what I will say though is whether or not this person's position in 3 years is specializing in homelessness, or whether it's responding to other more non-violent, less egregious crimes and just being a community services officer, I don't think the need for this role is going away.
My thought was we would add, if we needed to add additional, that opioid money,
Sure.
could be earmarked for this specific purpose, whether it's changing their structure of their job, or unfortunately, if we have to add to it and provide more services and more supervision or authority, then that would be another useful expenditure for that opioid money.
So we'll continue to account for all of our opioid funding, and make sure that that's separated and used for the appropriate use. We'll come back and provide a projection. It won't be exact because some of those settlements.
I understand.
You
Like
know,
I
they
said,
ebb
I
and flow,
realize
but
it
we'll
ebbs
get
and
you-
flows, but if we could get you know, hey, we're gonna be within this.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
So, are you finished? with your
I'm just answering questions and
Okay.
talking.
Under the data collection reporting, it's lists some minimum kinds of reports that are, you know, number of contacts and things, but given what you were just talking about, I think it's very important to put a more thorough, more robust data collection program in place on the onset. Obviously, you don't know what you don't know right now, and so having a perfect system at the beginning may not be possible, but I would like to have a solid accounting of what these people are doing, what kinds of events, you know, and so that we can kind of get a handle on it, so that a year or 2 or 3 down the road, we can make a much more informed decision about the value it's bringing to the community.
Fair point.
Is that fair, Chief?
I believe we already do it.
You probably do. I
haven't
just,
Seen it, so we can
Okay.
share that information with you in the future.
that's the key thing, is just that it's being collected early on, so we don't have to do it retroactively and try to remember, oh, shoot, what did we do last year?
And the data collection and reporting that you see in here is what is part of, you know, the specific grant agreement. We can
Yeah,
go
that's
above and
just,
beyond for our own
that's the
purposes.
minimum, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Any other discussion?
Just a super quick, this will probably be super easy to answer, but how much training are we providing for this individual?
Great question.
Officer Moody will primarily be responsible for training this new individual. There's currently, this is what was brought up the other day, and I would have to verify this with DPSST, but currently there's no CSO certification at the DPSST level. So I think a lot of our agencies around the state have kind of come up with their own plans as they've gone. You know, by reading through the contract, I can guarantee you that Officer Moody already does everything that's there in that contract. The things that you guys are asking for, the extra data. We have a database set up for daily activities. Officer Moody keeps that up to speed. There's a weekly report out, letting us know what he does. This is something that other CSO is just going to piggyback right into that same system. And we're going to be providing you more information that you're probably going to and above and beyond what the IGA is asking for.
But this is a non-sworn position, right?
Correct, non-sworn.
So
There are agencies around the state that have CSOs that are sworn. But ours is not. Ours is a non-sworn position.
Okay.
So there will be.
And that might be something that changes.
yeah,
Yeah.
as we look into.
And currently.
So what's the certification? I mean, what does this ideal candidate come with?
Good social skills.
Great social skills.
Okay, that moves me out. All right.
Very important for that officer to have the ability to communicate with everybody, be able to research ordinances, work with other city employees.
What about a background? That's what I'm looking for. Is it a
Well,
specific?
background, they can't be a convicted felon.
No, I'm sorry. Educational or
Work
There's
Job experience.
certifications
minimum
or?
right now that we asked for was a high school. I think the minimum was a high school diploma.
So we're not looking for a social worker with
No, but you.
an
some of the
MS and
skill
something or
sets
other.
Certainly could
They could,
carry over into this position.
right?
And I assume you might get some like previous law enforcement people or people with some social work background or other types of law enforcement background, maybe.
Yeah, there's of a few of the applications that I've seen. Yeah, you're seeing again, you're seeing some social work folks with some background, you're seeing younger folks that are interested in later becoming police officers using this
Trying to get the
stepping
door
stone
feedback.
training. You're seeing some, a couple of military veterans with some different levels of experience. You're seeing some administrative healthcare workers in some of these backgrounds as well. So we're getting so far out of the 18 candidates, pretty broad
Oh, that's good.
level
Yeah.
of
So
experience.
I like the on-the-job training, like you said, with Officer Moody. I would also like to see, make sure that we've got some funds set aside and a plan for conferences, seminars. This is an interesting area. It's growing. My sister-in-law, you know, heads up the Todos Juntos, and when she started with that group, she didn't know anything about anything pretty much. And now, you know, years of seminars and training later, she goes around lecturing and giving things on homelessness to whatever. These are so there's training, very pointed training out there that we need to tap into and make sure we're not just draw in a box the way we've always done it, that we're open to new ideas and other things that are trending or maybe making progress elsewhere.
I'll add on to that a little bit. I thought the PD was very well written. It's, I think it's important to clarify kind of consistent overlap of roles and responsibilities between Moody and this new position, because there is overlap. And then, focus on the parks enforcement and industrial way, where we have the issues downtown and all that. It'd be helpful to have kind of a clear process of, when a contact is made, then what happens and who gets contacted, and just tracking all that is really going to be important. And then I would suggest the training is really important to have lots of role playing. And there's like a Trail Keepers of Oregon does trail ambassador training, which is available online. There's also the, Metro Park Ranger positions that do training and all. And so I would think that, it is critical to kind of have that training available to this person, because it is a challenge. It's a challenging population to interact with. So.
And I think the difficulty we have in describing the person we're looking for kind of says how new this type of position is, and that the more we can provide some training and guidance, and the more the position will become clear in time.
Have faith in the process.
Yeah. All right. Yep. Anything else? Motion?
I move to authorize the city manager to sign the IGA between the city of Sandy and Clackamas County for homelessness response and outreach.
A motion?
Second.
That was loud.
Sorry, I.
No, it's good. It was very
I'll
definitive.
second that.
All right, motion from Councilor Ramsayer and a second from Councilor Hanley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mayor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. The ayes have it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we are to the report.
Me again. Are you tired of me yet? Don't answer that.
Well.
Did you want to know?
No, I don't. A couple brief things this evening. First, I wanted to say thank you to our essential workers who braved the snow and ice last week to make sure that all of our local streets and sidewalks and everything were as clear as possible. Could have certainly been a much worse storm than we had, but I appreciate all of our employees nonetheless coming in and making sure that we had de-icer down and gravel down and sidewalks that were shoveled for staff when they got to work and could safely access the parking lot and the public could access our doorways. So thank you. Secondly, several weeks ago when we had a work session regarding Deer Point Park and the covered basketball structure there was some conversation around doing one last survey with the community, the neighborhood over there around the desire if they wanted to actually have that basketball court covered and what that looked like for them. So a survey was sent out late last week to that neighborhood. Haven't heard any results or seen any results yet, but just wanted to let you know that correspondence has taken place. and we're getting
Via
feedback.
snail mail or?
Via snail mail, yep. That's the old school method, so we can target that specific.
Sorry.
And were they, so
Post
is there a QR code or a survey that they can do, or are they required to mail this back to us? Because that concerns me if that's how we did it.
Let me look at it again. I don't remember how.
Because a lot of people aren't gonna mail something back, but if there's a QR code or something easy.
We had
that they
good
can-
response the last time with responses being mailed back, and I certainly
Nope,
agree. Some
that's-
people won't do it, but
That's fine.
we did have a good. I'm sorry. We did that with the last survey, so I'm assuming that we stuck to the same process, but I don't know for sure. Please mail back in the returned envelope. So yes, we sent the return envelope. We had good feedback that way before. We'll hope for good feedback again this time.
So if you mail me something and want me to mail it back,
Not happening.
not gonna happen.
Okay. We'll target the QR code to you.
Not the target audience for that.
One thing I will just add for the record is we included a drawing for $50 gift card if you respond.
Okay.
So hopefully that's an incentive.
A little incentive? A little incentive? It would depend on what it was. I don't know.
$50 gift card to
Dutch
where?
Bros.
Dutch Bros, I'd take it.
It doesn't say. Doesn't say.
All right, excellent.
I love metric though, so how many did you send out?
Oh, I don't know how many are in that specific neighborhood. I can
I'd
get
like to know how many you
follow up.
sent out versus how many responded.
Yeah, we can follow up with that once we have
It's
final
good info
results.
because we have other type polls that we'd love to conduct in the coming months, I'm sure.
Yes, yes, we do. Sorry, let me just make a quick note for myself before I forget. Wanted to clarify, something that was on social media last week around the cancellation of a program at the community center. There was some misinformation around the center being closed during inclement weather. Wanted to take a brief moment to clarify what our policy is for the community center and programming with respect to inclement weather. The center does not close down when Oregon Trail School District closes. There has been a past practice for years and years and years that certain programming would be canceled if Oregon Trail School District closed.
Sure.
We've modified that policy to be a little more use good judgment on what the weather is doing in Sandy locally and not following OTSD because OTSD is so large and oftentimes school is canceled because there's a weather event in Welch's, but things down here are totally fine and pavement's black and you can see it and it's not slippery. So we've implemented a new policy to have a little more discretion around when programming actually needs to be canceled, and that's going to be centered around truly more dangerous commuting and transportation reasons locally, not in Boring, not in Welch's, but what's happening here in Sandy and what do our roads look like here and what does the neighborhood streets look like here. Just want to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page and what that policy and practice looks like now and clear up any miscommunication.
Who makes that decision for them?
So I make decisions on city facilities, just, from a broad standpoint. The Recreation and Senior Services Manager, John Wallace, will make the decision on specific programming at that site based on weather conditions and the target audience. Right now, if it's a senior program, like I don't know, one of their activity classes or personal fitness classes, that's probably going to lean more towards a canceling with just a slight sort of dusting of snow or any sort of slippery conditions because we don't want the most vulnerable population trekking to our community center. Whereas, kinder dance or something like that with a different demographic later in the day is probably not going to get canceled because they've got, a little more agile, maybe not as likely to hurt themselves with a lingering, broken bone than a different age group may. So there's some discretion that John will get to use depending on the type of program and time of day. And then last but not least, we are going after some additional federal funding for discretion project and the engineering component of that. We've reached out to Senator Bonham and Representative Drazen and gotten a letter of support from them for the federal ask. Nellie, I don't know if you have anything to share that you think is pertinent to the group. I just wanted to be, clear that we are going after every dollar, both state and federal, that we can find and seeking support from legislators, hoping to get support from Gresham on this ask as well. Because
Is Oregon getting federal funding?
I'm sorry?
Is Oregon getting federal funding?
Well, absolutely, why not?
Is anyone?
It's one of those things
So-
where if you don't try.
We wanna try everything we can try.
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, whether that turns into anything, don't have a crystal ball there, but we're gonna turn over every rock and apply for everything we can and hope that we get some help along the way to facilitate a solution to this problem.
While Washington DC and the feds are kind of in a huge turmoil right now, and the EPA will, if they haven't yet, will be at some point in a similar turmoil. Josh, are you or others reaching out to your peers over there to see if those tea leaves change? As things get rolled back and changed, I just want us to make sure we're looking at an opportunity, should one present itself, to maybe relax some things or to renegotiate or look at things.
Take advantage of a situation.
Take advantage of the
Or
situation.
an opportunity.
An opportunity, yes.
I've had some conversations with some of the folks at EPA about that. It is as you might suspect, it is a complicated dynamic because at the same time that the direction may change from the appointed agency heads, the scrutiny increases from outside environmental groups, which kind of gets them squeezed from both sides. And I guess the story that I heard was at least in the prior administration, the prior Trump administration, the result of kind of that coming from both directions was that not much actually was able to be changed as far as their approach to local government issues.
Yeah.
Whether that's different this time or
It's,
not.
this is
we'll continue to monitor
unprecedented,
that.
so I would not assume that that history is any indication of where we are now. So I encourage you to stay close for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
I will add, at the end of the day, it's less about just the EPA though, and we've got a consent decree, right? So unless the whole system is shaken up and that consent decree is shredded.
I
we still
know.
have-
The
It's
system-
possible. It's
I'm not
possible.
saying it's not possible, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that it's beyond just one
Yeah, yeah,
specific
for sure.
government.
3 weeks
body.
ago, I wouldn't have been saying this, all right? But just watching where I work and what I hear, and it's unprecedented. And so all kinds of things could be turned on their heads.
We will absolutely watch it closely.
That's the key. Thanks.
That's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, reports?
I don't love that I have to go first.
But
Um,
I can if you want.
Because John's not in his chair.
I know.
I'll pass.
We had the library board meeting was this week, and they are, and my only thing to report is they're working on their strategic plan and had 167 responses in their survey, and they were just working to get that information together and come up with some next steps. It's great.
I haven't had any of my extracurricular activities yet, but I will soon, so I have nothing to report on planning commission or transit authority yet. What I did want to comment on was the Clackamas County Tourism Strategic Investment Program and the $66,900 that we got in a grant for the camera at Johns Road Viewpoint. I think with as many people as visit there, that's gonna be a huge pull to bring people to the community and visit other businesses and expand our economic outreach to people coming through town. And I think it's a long time coming, and I think it'll be a great addition to promoting Sandy and what a great place it is.
Thanks.
On that economic development front, I hope we're moving forward with either seeking a contractor or some sort of person. We have what I see as opportunities. We have a nice piece of property that's currently for sale on Proctor that has a business and a house on it that is zoned probably beneficial to certain types of businesses, that has ERUs attached to it, that I really feel like if we had somebody with economic development as their focus, maybe we could utilize that piece of property and get something in that we might like. So again, this is me saying we need to somehow focus on economic development, and we're not. So.
Thanks.
Oh, it's good. I'll jump right into that then. I recently applied to join the Mountain Head Economic Alliance Board.
Excellent.
And I'm on their board, and you have to apply for it. So I filled out the application, and I think they have their first meeting in 2 days, and that's when they vote. So we'll find out hopefully in a week if I get selected or not to be on that board, which will help because they give loans to small businesses to help in the community and not the area. So I'm doing that. I did get to attend my first wastewater committee meeting. Interesting. I was in front of Walt Disney. Very interesting. A lot of acronyms. I don't really have anything to tell you that you don't already know because I didn't learn much from that meeting other than, wow, there's a lot to learn. And Don, I will just ask you a lot of questions along the way as I pick that up.
We felt bad because we were 3/4 of the way through the meeting before we realized Chris was
I
on.
was on it, and my camera was on too, so it was funny.
There was no excuse.
I did miss the parks meeting. I'm sorry, Rochelle. I was in Denver, so I couldn't make it, but I will be on the next one. And I think all of my work events are done for the year now, so we should be close. So I don't really have much of another than to let you know about the Alliance Board, which the mayor does know about, so.
Thanks. I don't have anything new to report. Mayor, do you want to wrap us up? If you're still on.
Yeah, I'm still on. I have,
Gold.
that issue about the proclamations came up, and if folks have any comments on that, Stan's approach to that was that, there's all sorts of fairly political entities out there that want you to do a proclamation on all sides, and it gets a little out of hand fairly quickly, so he tended to kind of just.
Can I pause you for a minute, Mayor, just for a second? So what Mayor's talking about is we get approached by all kinds of different entities for proclamation for this or that or any cause of the day. And so that's what she's referring to. Yeah, please continue. There were some lost looks there for a moment.
Okay, so yeah, we had a request from the Child Abuse Awareness Coalition or something, and then the next day was the Parkinson's support group. So Rich kind of brought it up and mentioned that, we had Bee City and Tree City here. That's something that we kind of did for Sandy. So there's a little bit different, but if folks have some particular suggestions about how to deal with this, I'm open to it. And Jeff kind of suggested there is ways to kind of basically put a proclamation in the consent agenda and not take up city time. So that's my more.
Yeah, Mayor, if you're looking for some ideas in thinking about this week and reading your email, I think both of the individuals, so child abuse and Parkinson's, I think those are worthy causes and things that I think most people would feel are important. So I guess in my thought moving forward would be as long as it was something that was apolitical, so
non-political.
Non-political, not like a social justice issue or something where, there would be different sides of the coin, but something like a disease that affects millions of people or child abuse that affects a lot of
Nobody is
children.
for child.
Nobody's gonna be, exactly, and so I guess that's kind of my 2 cents on those, that if they're those types of issues, I would support those. So.
Well, we can kind of, I'll take that, comment and, work with Jeff to see if we can't, come up with something. And then we'll just monitor it to see if it gets out of hand and, make sure we've got criteria in there to kind of screen things. Cause then the next thing was, I'm meeting with Representative Maxine Dexter, Senator Merkley, and taking our ask letter with us. And then I'm also meeting with Mount Hood Community College president and PGE president. I am excited about the live cam project. I think that's been a long time coming, and there's the potential to add a air quality device on there, and also possibly a ham radio for when things go south. So anyway, that's something that they're kind of considering. I am working on the economic development focus area. My interest is kind of getting a bit of a survey for folks to kind of see what areas, what's our focus area, and get some feedback from folks on that committee. And then lastly, we had that wastewater meeting the other day, and the biggest thing was just talking about the communications plan, and kind of came to a conclusion that we kind of need to go a little bit of a different direction on the short-term communications plan to kind of deal with some crisis points and all, and then come up with a longer-term approach as we continue to implement that complex project. So and thank you, Don, for filling in for me. I appreciate that. And
Cool. Hey, Mayor, before you're done, when you meet with PGE, can you ask Maria Pope, I think that's her name?
Yep.
Just her for a big endorsement and donation for our Winterfest, because we need them to be a gold level sponsor of that event.
Yep.
Asking at the bottom hasn't worked, but since you're going to the top, let's start there.
Yeah, sure. And they do that as part of their
exactly
program. So I'll work with Rochelle on that. Thank you.
Energy efficient lights. So
yeah.
We'll add.
They need anything they can get that might give them some good publicity.
Yes.
Jeff and I met with the new government affairs for our region 2 weeks ago, and we talked about sponsorship and donation opportunities. So
Excellent,
we've got
thank
a new face there that we've also been trying to, squeeze a little bit of cash out of.
Good. Well, with that, meeting adjourned. Home. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.